Good afternoon and welcome to Save Time, Save Money Saturday. I'm Michelle Stinson-Ross with Offers.com. Today I am joined by Dr. Amanda Bruce of PetCare of Duluth and also Rob Karwath, who is a pet owner just like me. And here in Texas, I also have my buddy Gus. Say hi, Gus. Hi, Gus. Gus is my 10-plus-year-old rescue poodle mix, and since he's kind of an old dog, I wanted to make sure that I asked Dr. Amanda several questions about how to make sure that our pets are healthy, they're happy, they're not getting into overheating and dehydration and other issues that we sometimes find our pets getting into in the heat of the summer. So that's what we're talking to Dr. Bruce about today. Dr. Amanda, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about who you are and where you are and all that kind of good stuff.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So I'm a veterinarian in northern Minnesota, so we deal with heat and humidity, but for a lot less portion of the year than you guys do down there, I'm sure. So I currently own a vet clinic that focuses on preventative health care, so basic wellness types of things that you would need to have done with your pet. Vaccinations, flea and tick preventative, heartworm testing, that sort of thing. Prior to opening the clinic, I did work at a local emergency clinic for 3 years as well, where we did deal with quite a few heat-related emergencies. So certainly everybody should be aware of kind of the summertime do's and don'ts with pets, but down where you're at, it's even more important.
Mm-hmm. We're expecting to have triple-digit heat later in the summer, and the cicadas and everything are already out and kind of warning us about how hot it actually is getting. We're definitely into the 90s and, mid to high humidity most days now.
Mm-hmm. I would say as a general rule of thumb, if you don't want to be in it, your pet probably shouldn't be in it either. I mean, it's as simple as that. We deal with extreme cold up here, and so in extreme cold, keeping them covered and sweaters, booties, that sort of thing. And in the heat, if you don't want to walk on that asphalt, your pet probably shouldn't be either. And if you feel like you want to be in the shade and drink a big glass of water, you should probably be providing those basic necessities for your pet as well.
Excellent. What kind of healthcare issues can arise during the summer heat for our pets? What should we be looking out for?
Sure. So summer brings with it a lot of, obviously the parasites that we deal with pets. So fleas and ticks are the big ones. Flea infestations are no fun for anybody involved, and ticks really can spread quite a few diseases. Up here we deal mainly with Lyme disease and anaplasmosis. You guys probably are in the Rocky Mountain spotted fever hotbed. But any of those ticks that we're seeing these days spread disease, and so keeping the ticks and pests off pets also keeps them off of family members as well. So I say, you want something that repels and kills in the majority of cases, just to help keep them off the pet, out of the house, and off the people that are involved. You brought up a good point about older pets. They do require a bit more care as far as planning and making sure that you're on top of just making sure that preventative health care is up, and that if there are any underlying health conditions, that those have been identified as soon as possible. Poodles tend to be prone to heart murmurs that can affect how well they oxygenate when it's hot out. Any of I always mention kind of the smushy face breeds are definitely at higher risk during the heat because they just can't move air back and forth as readily. If they are snorers or really snorty, they're really at risk for being heat intolerant. And so those are the dogs you want to make sure pretty much go from air-conditioned place to air-conditioned place when the heat get high.
Excellent. Rob, do you have any just general summer pet questions as a pet owner as well?
Yeah. Well, you can see I've got my running stuff on, so it's a nice day here, and exercise is a a big thing for all of us. We want to get out and enjoy the summer, warmer weather. But I noticed, Amanda, yesterday, right outside my office window, a guy was running along Skyline with a big, some kind of a husky dog, just a very hairy dog. And actually, now that I think about it, he was riding a bike and the dog was running. And it something made me think that's not a good thing. I hope it's just for a short distance.
Yeah.
The dogs seem to be catching up, but do we sometimes forget that dogs don't sweat, that they have to cool themselves by breathing? And
Yeah, that's a very good point. That dog, that's a very athletic breed, and so if he's conditioned that dog may be completely capable of that type of exercise. But the average person just, going out on a hot day and really exerting their pet is, like you said, setting them up for heat exhaustion. So if they can't keep up, they're starting to lag, or they can't seem to catch their breath, that's when you need to stop. Most often, heat stroke will start with that excessive panting. They're just trying to move air to cool themselves, because they can sweat a little bit through the bottom of their paws, but really panting is their main route of cooling themselves down. And when it seems like they can't catch their breath or catch up that way, you need to stop and get them to a cooler spot. And sometimes they actually will need to be seen by a veterinarian to be sedated or tranquilized, so that they just chemically can be calmed down, because that whole can't catch their breath anxiety cycle is just a really kind of a vicious snowball that takes off.
will dogs, and I'm thinking dogs particularly here, but will they tell us when they need to stop? Like, will they just resist going further? Will they lie down?
It depends on the dog. I think we've probably all known that Labrador that would fetch a tennis ball until it keeled over dead. And so you do have to take some responsibility in those situations to call the timeout and just stop really active dogs on those hot days, because they'll go until they can't anymore.
Well, I had my other Springer who was really athletic, and she just loved to run with me. And a couple times I would say, it's too hot, or of course she doesn't understand that. She just thinks you're leaving me behind, buddy. What's going on? But as bad as I felt about that, I really didn't want to see her. And it was based on a couple days earlier. She just, it was a lot of huffing and puffing at the end, and lying down. And so I guess just being careful and thinking about it from the animal's perspective, perhaps.
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you so much. What about just general outdoor environment? I know my parents have strictly outdoor dogs. A lot of us have pets that go in and out. What do we need to consider about our outdoor environment to make sure that they have a cool spot to go, that they have plenty of water? I mean, what are those considerations? What maybe should we do in the backyard to make sure that we're not putting our pets at risk in the summer heat?
Sure. I would say making sure that they have a consistent place that they can go to for shade, and keeping in mind that water bucket is somehow secured. On a hot day, if they are on a chain or a leash, that can get wrapped around the bucket and have that tipped early in the day. That could lead to dehydration pretty quickly. So securing water buckets either against a fence or a gate, or up against a building where they can't be tipped over, is always a helpful piece of advice for people. And then just coming back and making sure that there is adequate resources for that pet. One thing that people often don't think about is, also keeping it clean. So picking up poop on a regular basis. If there is any parasites, most parasites live in the poop, are going to then kind of infect that ground or that area where that pet is in, making it harder for you to keep up with the basic care, because there's that constant reinfection risk. And also we don't see much for fleas up here because of the cold winters that we have. But certain environments certainly are more prone to getting fleas, and so doing spot treatment and moving the pets in and out of areas that they might be at higher risk for that would be, wise to consider.
What are your thoughts on having like a little wading pool or something with enough water that a dog can actually get in, splash in, kind of cool themselves off that way. Is that a good idea, a bad idea? What,
I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I don't think there's any harm in that, honestly. Again, as long as it's clean and fresh, it's a play pool, but it's also excess water for if they are hot. I mean, you're not going to keep them from drinking, nor should you try, as long as you're keeping it clean and replaced on a regular basis.
Right. Growing up in southern Oklahoma, I can remember for years and years and years, our family pets just absolutely loving having it. Even when my brother and I outgrew the little kitty wading pools, my parents kept one for the outside dog for that very reason, and it was the dog's favorite thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea.
Cool. Rob, what are some of the things you do as far as the outdoor environment and taking good care of Chelsea?
Well, we're at our lake place right now, and a little earlier you saw a picture of a lonely dog waiting at the door, upset that people had gone to the beach and she wasn't included. We've got a problem with her. She's a Springer Spaniel, and she likes to chase birds. It's in her nature. And so, and Springers are the dog that I've had really all throughout my life. But they can see birds out there on the lake, and they will go after them. And we've had situations where, with this one in particular, we really don't trust her to come down there because she'll go after a loon, and she'll keep going, and we're worried that she'll wear herself out and get into trouble. So, I mean, we hate to leave her, but is that the right thing to do?
Yeah, I think if she's going to get to the point where she's overexerted, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. You mentioned water safety too, and as you know, we see a lot of pets out on boats, on docks, just going hard in the water all day. And it's not unheard of. In fact, there's more and more of a recommendation to actually put life jackets on dogs. They're typically riding at the front of a boat, they're jumping in, and that life jacket gives you a handle to pull them back into a boat or off a dock. Also, I recently saw, too, if you were to capsize and the dog had a life jacket on, you can actually use that handle on the life jacket to assist people getting back into shore just through the power of the dog. So, again, I think we're always our pet's best advocate, and knowing our pets and using common sense. The majority of pet ownership is common sense. If you are starting to get to the point where you think your dog is overexerted, most likely they are. And so pulling her out of the water, putting her on a leash, throwing her back in the house, or just preventing those interactions is the smartest thing that you can do.
It's happened enough with this one dog that we just don't take our chances anymore, and it's in her instinct to go after it. But the life jacket idea is a great idea. It can save your pet, might also save you.
Yeah.
Here around Austin, we have several lakes. I used to live in Florida, obviously, coastal and intercoastal areas. Going to the beach has definitely been part of my lifestyle for a while. And I really had never considered a pet life vest. Where might we find resources? Is there like an online company or something, Amanda, that we could look for a pet vest like that?
I'm sure that online you could find them. The big thing is always sizing, and typically knowing your pet's weight or breed is how you would find that sort of thing. We have PetSmarts, Petco's up here that if you wanted to stop and try one on, you could. Otherwise, online, I think, would be A-okay.
So most of the big chain ones do carry them, you just have to ask, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Very cool tip. Thank you. I will probably be posting a link for that one later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since we're talking about boating and everything, what are some other things just about traveling? Maybe we're not taking them on the water, but because it's summertime, we're going on a road trip, maybe we're going to see family or whatever. What are some of your tips for taking our pets on the road, taking them with us?
Sure. Yeah. I recently got a new cat, and anybody who's heard anything about her knows that I have tried very hard to get her acclimated to the car, because my last cat was a nightmare in the car. Couldn't stand to be in the crate, would always urinate in the car. It was just a mess. So this one, from the time she was a kitten, I put her in a crate and I took her on car rides, anywhere from 20 minutes to 3 hours. And now I have a soft-sided crate, and I put her blanket in it, and she sleeps in there routinely in the house, and she doesn't make a peep in it when she's in the car. So acclimating as a kitten in this case worked wonders. Also, if you're talking about air travel, it's always important to look into the rules and regulations of the airlines you're flying. And more people are flying with pets, so make sure that you're proactive, because a lot of carriers will only let X number of animals on the flight. The one I flew recently only allows 5 pets per cabin. So you want to make sure that your pet is enrolled as one of those 5 pets as soon as you know you're bringing your pet, just to make sure that you can bring it. And then also something that people don't often think about is there are interstate transport rules. So if you are crossing state lines, legally you do need at least to have a rabies certificate, but you probably want to get online and look at each state's legal recommendations, or excuse me, not recommendations, requirements for crossing state lines. You want to make sure your rabies vaccine's updated, and then make sure that you print out a copy of your vaccination record and just tuck it in at probably a couple different places to make sure you've got it on hand.
Well, and that's also handy when you're stopping places. I know that we've taken road trips that we wound up going to like a theme park or something like that. I know Walt Disney World and Universal and the major theme parks in Orlando, they do have pet kennels for guests that have pets, but they want to be sure that their rabies are up to date and that kind of. So even though those kennels are there for your convenience, they do want to know that your pet is safe and they can be handled if they need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I had never seen kennels associated with a park until I was in Florida recently. I actually was traveling with my cat and didn't want to put her in the car, and I actually kenneled her at a state park where you've probably seen it. You put them in there and you're in charge of the lock, and I had a litter box, and I thought, what a great alternative to keeping them in the car, because that's probably not something that I would have done, but I think many people would be tempted to keep their pet in the car, which is never safe when it's warm out. But it's a nice, safe alternative, and I was happy to see that, and I hope that that is a trend that's growing.
Do you two want to address what the risk is in leaving your pet in the car, even for just a few minutes?
Yeah. Well, there's some studies that have been done, and I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but a car in the heat, even in like 70-degree temperatures with the windows cracked up to 2 inches, gets to the point within several minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, where it can get to heats that are potentially deadly to that pet, and they can overheat very rapidly. So not recommended at all.
I noticed at the Mall of America, the big shopping center in the Twin Cities, there actually are a couple of places that take dogs or cats for the day. And so families traveling around the Midwest to make that the destination can have an alternative to leaving the dog in the car, even in the covered parking garage where it's just not ideal. Mm-hmm. But there are a number of, so maybe more than people would realize, options are springing up to allow them to take better care of their pets when they're not going to be in the car with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point.
Excellent. All right, so pet grooming. I know this is something that Rob and I both talked about quite a bit while we were on the Twitter chat. And obviously, with my poodle, as tight and as woolly as he is, I have him groomed year-round. Mm-hmm. But what kind of considerations should we change what we ask our groomers to do or what we do ourselves come summertime?
Yeah. I've had poodles in the past, and I always did the fancier clips in the winter and just kind of the kennel clip or the short clip all over in the summer. I think when you're active and you're in the woods, you're going to get burrs and twigs and things stuck into any long-haired dog's coat. And so whether you do it at home or pay somebody to do it, just paying attention to your pet's skin and hair coat is priority. It's a great bonding thing to do, too. You should take a look at your pet's feet are the big one, but also the feathers behind the legs and the underside, the belly. Just looking for any sort of matting, wounds, abrasions. any spots with any sort of debris from being outside stuck in them. So short hair or long hair, I would say just routinely going up and down the legs and on the belly and around the face, looking for, you know, any sort of abnormality that the average pet owner could see is great. Length of coat, it depends a lot upon how much time and effort you want to put into home care. Certainly in the summer, if they're in and out of water, the shorter the better. But if you're willing to groom and bathe and maintain at home, you can have a long-haired dog year-round if you want, but it takes time and effort.
Okay.
I think what I found with my dogs is I kind of liked always having them groomed, just a hair maintenance issue. You know, there wasn't as much of it, and you know, I'll gladly trade that for a little extra. And I don't know, our dogs always seemed to be happier when they came back from the groomer. Maybe it was just a new experience, but they seemed to be a little, I don't know, friskier or just happier.
Yep. Well, we see a lot of hot spots, which is just a name for basically a skin infection that dogs can get. A lot of times if they have underlying allergies, they'll get hot spots. But when you have that hot, humid air right next to the skin and anything that's making the skin already a little irritated, they'll get these little localized infections. So German Shepherds, Golden Retrievers are the breeds that we see most commonly have those. And keeping them groomed short does seem to help prevent those types of things, and it also helps you see them quicker because they can just creep up overnight, it seems like.
Are there are some breeds that have two coats of hair? Am I saying it correctly?
Yeah, so some people with Huskies won't shave them because they think that there's actually kind of a layer of air that gets trapped in there that can help to cool them. So.
But a dog, so they would just have one coat or one layer, or is that the two-layer?
I think that actually the majority of them do have two layers, but it's just the density of that undercoat can vary.
The flip side of this is for particularly with like pets with light colored coats or really, really thin coats that once you groom them down and you shave them close, all of a sudden skin is exposed that isn't normally exposed to the sun. Is there a risk of sunburn? What should we be doing in those regards? I mean, that's kind of the flip side. Either the dog has too much hair or not enough, and either one can cause problems.
Right, exactly. Sunscreen is perfectly acceptable. You know, kind of up on that pink nose area, that can be burned. Also, exactly like you said, that close clip, especially on a light-coated dog, can lead to sunburn. Also, one thing you brought up earlier was older dogs. Sometimes you'll see some pretty significant thinning along the back of the hair coat in older animals. And so any sort of spray-on or rub-on sunscreen to those areas that look like the sun's going to beat through would be good. You know, T-shirts, little doggy coats, that sort of thing can be put on there as well to help as that UV barrier.
Excellent. Let's see, we did grooming. What should we keep in mind about pest control? Both, you know, fleas and ticks and things that actually get on our pets, as well as what should we keep in mind for keeping other household pests like ants and mosquitoes and stuff, because, you know, there's a lot of chemicals sometimes going down that we should probably be aware of with pet exposure, correct?
Yeah, you know, there's always a kind of a mixed message with a lot of the like premise sprays that you can do, not only for bugs but also for weed control. So I would really be cautious on yard-based treatments and really question strongly and research anything that you put on there. Up here in northern Minnesota and Wisconsin, we've been having an absolutely horrible mosquito season, unlike anything we have ever seen before. And so we're actually having our yard sprayed and we have to keep the pets off for X amount of minutes. But we don't have to wait for a rain or anything like that. But I certainly, even with the assurance of safety, will keep my pet in probably for a couple of days beyond the recommendation, just because I get a little bit paranoid about that as well. But we really were looking at the trade-off of what sort of mosquito-borne diseases could we potentially see in our kids versus the downside of the spray. You know, we have West Nile and encephalitis and all those kind of scary, big, nasty diseases that I don't want to deal with. So it's always a trade-off anytime you talk about pesticides. What are you possibly preventing versus the downsides of what you're using, and finding the minimum effective dose.
Amanda, I've got a question for you. This is related to our dog in our cottage here. She comes up from where she is in Iowa most of the time, and she'll come up here and she will eat grass. I know there's something about the special flavor of the natural salad here that's
yeah.
You know, there
she
aren't any.
She doesn't do that at home?
Not as much, according to my folks, when she's there, but she just will sit out here and graze, and they wonder, is it okay, or is a little bit okay, or
does she
should
throw
we just...
it up?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
You know, a little bit is okay. That is such a common question, and I don't think anybody knows why pets eat grass. Sometimes they do it, you know, do they do it because they have an upset stomach, or do they want to throw up? Does it make them throw up? You know, I don't know the answer to that. It's pretty common, but I'll go back to anything in moderation typically is okay, but I would steer her clear of that if it gets to the point where it's excessive, because they can form just a mat of grass that can cause an obstruction if it's too obsessive compulsive of a behavior.
Yeah, I think it's been a problem in the past, and so we let her do it a little bit, and then it's like, enough of that. Come on over here.
Yeah, exactly. Treat them like a 3-year-old. Distract and replace.
Any tips as far as flea and tick control? I know that particularly the tick-borne diseases are an issue all over the U.S. So if you want to address that.
So we have recently, in my practice, moved away from some of the products that maybe have a bit less chemical in them, but we're taking upwards of 24 to 48 hours to kill ticks. And so we're moving towards products that are labeled as repellents, and then also that are claiming to kill within 8 to 12 hours. Many times, how quickly a disease, particularly in a tick, can go from the tick to the dog depends on where in the tick it lives. So for example, Lyme disease lives in the hind gut or the back of the stomach of the tick, and then there's a disease called anaplasmosis up here that lives in the mouth part of the tick. And so anaplasmosis goes from the tick to the dog very quickly, we think within 8 to 12 hours, whereas Lyme takes 24 to 48 hours. So when we have products that are taking 48 hours to kill a tick, we have multiple diseases that can make it into our dog in that time. So again, we carry a product called the Seresto collar, but there are others out there, the Scalibur collar, that claim to repel and kill. And that's been a real mindset change for people, because I keep telling everybody, I spent over a decade telling people not to put flea and tick collars on their pets. But now they've been redesigned, and we're actually now pushing people towards some of these newer generation flea and tick collars that are on the market. And it's remarkable. They actually, I don't know if you've used flea and tick collars in the past, but they used to come with just a horrible smell. They had this powder residue on them, lots of reactions associated with them. They were pretty nasty. But now they've really come up with some great new products that are out there that we've been really pleased with. So for us anyway, we're moving towards these collars, which you put on. They treat for a full 8 months, and you just kind of set it and forget it. Because the other thing with product is, if you're doing a once-a-month product, you have to be compliant and you have to remember to put it on. If you're like me, I usually wait until I see a tick and then I put it on, which doesn't work in the scheme of things. You need to put it on at the beginning of the season and keep it on, and for the 8 months and replace it if you're in an area where you need year-round protection, just back to back. So they're doing everything they can to make life easier for pet owners, you know, the manufacturers, with keeping in mind that people don't want to be pilling their pets, and they're not going to remember to give products. So, yeah.
Right, that was kind of what I was running into with like Frontline and Advantage. They seemed to work for a while, and even when I was really good to make sure that I was consistent with the application, after a while it seems like they just kind of lost effectiveness, and it was like, here I am trying to rid my dog of fleas and all that kind of stuff because the groomer's like, your dog is overrun. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm trying my best.
Yeah. I know and there's actually a lot of debate out there as far as are some of these bugs forming resistance to some of our products, and again, they have proven now heartworm disease, which is spread by mosquitoes, has some resistance to some of the meds that we use. It's, you know, the jury's still out as to whether the fleas and ticks are developing resistance, but I wouldn't be surprised if at some point they do develop resistance to some of these products.
Rob, I think you and I both had questions about the flea and tick pill. Is that right?
Yeah, there's like the question that we had was how effective is that? Is that a good option, or is it not so much?
Well, there are multiple products on the market, and I don't know the details of all of them. There's one that was pitched to us this year, which did, I believe, the heartworm preventative as well as killed the fleas and ticks. But again, that claim on the ticks for our area is not sufficient enough for me to recommend it. I want something that kills or repels those ticks, and for something to wait 24 to 48 hours is not good for us. If I lived in an area of the country where I was much more concerned about fleas than ticks, it's absolutely a product I would recommend. Again, you're rolling your heartworm preventative in with your flea and tick preventative, so you've got one item to remember to give once a month. So there are absolutely areas of the country where I think it would be good, but you have to weigh your risk of fleas versus ticks, and for our community, it's not my favorite recommendation. It's always better than nothing, but it wouldn't be my favorite choice.
Well, the reason I asked is because my vet in Florida, when we lived in Florida, we've recently moved, but my vet in Florida really spoke very highly of exactly the same preventative that you're talking about. It had heartworm, it had flea and tick, it was all in one little bite. And we tried it, and Gus actually had a negative behavioral reaction to it. He got really amped up and couldn't relax. It was the most bizarre thing, and it was immediately after I fed him the stuff. I'm like, I'm not feeding this to him again. That was awful. I felt bad to put the dog through it.
Yeah, that's scary to see that sort of thing. I mean, then, yeah, if I saw that, I probably would look for an alternate as well. And I would always, I mean, this is really important because a lot of times people don't think to do this, but I certainly encourage people to always contact their veterinarian and the manufacturer, because that's the only way we're going to get better and better products out there, is to know what animals react with which products. There have been products on the market over the years that large breed dogs did great on, but small breed dogs would have neurologic complications associated with them, and back to the drawing board on many of those.
Okay. My final question for you: what does a summertime checkup consist of, and what should we be aware of when we do have a heat-related emergency and we're coming to the vet? I know a lot of people are really concerned about how much a pet bill can run them, especially in an emergency situation.
So summertime checkup for us, doing preventative health care, we have certain vaccines that we consider core in this area, but then there's also vaccinations that are really lifestyle driven. And so I think having an honest discussion with your veterinary staff as to what your pet's true lifestyle is. If your pet is a couch potato, never leaves your yard, and barely even puts its feet on the ground to go outside ever, it has completely different needs than a dog that is going to be going to the groomers, being boarded on a regular basis, goes to the dog park. You know, those dogs have a different set of requirements. So having that discussion, same with cats. If you have an indoor-only cat versus a cat that goes out on a leash versus a cat that maybe lives its life outside, those are three very distinct scenarios as far as preventative health care. You know, making sure the basics are covered, making sure that animal is microchipped so it can be returned if it happens to get away, making sure you've had a discussion about what sort of topical preventatives or oral preventatives that you need. You know, we're one of the few areas of the country that doesn't strongly push heartworm preventative. I mean, we use it, but it's more for the deworming components. But in other areas of the country, heartworm preventative year-round is an absolute must. And then also things like those underlying health conditions that could be identified on physical exam. Talk about weight. Weight discussions are bigger and bigger, and more time spent on them in my exam room. It seems like every day. A lot of pets are overweight, and that's one of the biggest contributing factors to exercise intolerance, heat intolerance, and learning how to assess your pet's weight at home. And I can share this here because it's kind of one of the easy things that we share in the exam room. But with a flat hand, you know, if you run your hand or your fingers along the top of your knuckles, that's the healthy weight of a dog or a cat. If you put your hand flat, palm up, and feel along your knuckles, if you have to push over that fat pad to feel those bones, and that pet's a little bit plump. So people always come in to me and they want to know how much exactly should my pet weigh, and I really will give them a weight range, but say much more so, you know, these are the things you should look for on the physical exam that you can do at home. And then the weight and then breathing. We've talked about that a little bit earlier. But, you know, if you have a short-faced dog, recognizing that dog is likely to be a lot less heat and exercise tolerant, especially in real humid weather.
Excellent.
I think Amanda has always said, you know, that just like with people, the weight issue is a big deal that she sees, and that's one of the things that we can do as pet owners to keep our pets healthy year-round.
Excellent. That wraps up all of the questions I had for you. Dr. Amanda, are there any particular tips, tricks, things that maybe I missed that you might want to bring up real quick as we start to wrap up our conversation?
I think summer, you know, kind of we're focusing on heat in summer today. As I said earlier also, we look forward to summer 9 months out of the year. And so really focusing on finding things that you and your pet can do to enjoy the entire year, but particularly in the summer, and spending time training so that you have a social pet that you're happy and proud to bring out and about with you. Dog, cat, doesn't matter. Both of them can be trained with a minimal amount of effort. It does take effort, but can be trained to be great companions. You know, cats on harnesses and leashes are perfectly acceptable. Dogs at dog parks, dogs on leashes, you know, you want a well-rounded, adjusted animal that you can safe and confidently take with you.
Rob?
You know, something Amanda has said recently that just we've ended up talking about with our animals being out more is the importance of a leash. She said that, you know, when she was working in the emergency clinic, that she often said with her colleagues, a 6-foot nylon or leather leash would have saved a lot of trouble here, and that's a dog getting into a porcupine or a dog getting out into the street, you know, and the consequences there are pretty serious. I was just over here yesterday on 4th of July, dogs everywhere, and right along the beach, a dog running out, hearing something, his owners were getting into something, and he wanted to be with them, and were running into the street, and you know, just thinking about that leash and the importance of it, even if it seems a little restrictive, it could save a lot of trouble down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a great point. And remembering dogs are not people, they do not learn their lesson. Being hit by a car doesn't mean they're going to look both ways the next time. So using a leash that is short enough to maintain your control over your pet is absolutely essential. Yeah, good point.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Amanda Bruce of the PetCare of Duluth, and Rob Carwath, a good friend of mine and fellow pet owner. I'm so glad that you joined us today for our Save Time, Save Money Saturday Hangout. I hope that you guys have a splendid day, and thank you everybody else for watching along with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.